What if some of the most beloved stars in Hollywood history were living double lives? For nearly 30 years, Johnny Carson sat behind the desk of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, interviewing the biggest celebrities in America. Millions watched him laugh with them, joke with them, and celebrate their careers. But Carson knew something the public didn't. Again and again, he sat across from actors whose public image was carefully crafted, sometimes completely different from the truth of their private lives. Carson wasn't interested in exposing them. In fact, he often protected them. But in his later years, he reportedly spoke about the hidden realities behind some of Hollywood's most famous faces. Here are 8 stars whose public identities hid far more complicated private truths. 1. Rock Hudson. Few actors symbolized Hollywood masculinity in the 1950s more than Rock Hudson. Tall, handsome, and charming, Hudson became one of the era's most popular romantic leads. His films with Doris Day turned him into the ultimate fantasy for millions of American women. But in Hollywood circles, his sexuality was widely known. Carson understood the strange tension this created whenever Hudson appeared on his show. The public believed they were watching the embodiment of heterosexual romance. Behind the scenes, everyone involved knew that image had been carefully constructed. Hudson's powerful agent, Henry Wilson, worked aggressively to protect that illusion. In 1955, Hudson even married Wilson's secretary, Phyllis Gates, a relationship many later described as a strategic move meant to silence rumors. The marriage lasted only 3 years. Carson reportedly struggled with the idea that entire public identities were being manufactured for audiences. He never judged Hudson personally, but he was uneasy about how deeply the system relied on deception. When Hudson died of AIDS-related complications in 1985, the truth finally became public. For many Americans, it was the first time they realized how much of Hollywood's image-making was built on secrecy. 2. Cary Grant. Cary Grant represented elegance and sophistication for generations of moviegoers. His suave voice, effortless charm, and romantic roles made him one of Hollywood's greatest leading men. But Carson reportedly found Grant's private life fascinating for another reason. For years, Grant shared a Santa Monica beach house with fellow actor Randolph Scott. Their home became quietly known in Hollywood as Bachelor Hall. Photographs of the two men exercising together, dining together, and relaxing by their pool frequently appeared in fan magazines. At the time, the public accepted the explanation that they were simply close friends. But insiders understood the relationship might have been far deeper. Grant married 5 times throughout his life, yet many historians believe some of those marriages functioned partly to maintain his public image. Carson reportedly saw Grant's famous persona as a kind of performance, a role that allowed the man-born Archibald Leach to survive in an industry that demanded conformity. 3. Katharine Hepburn. Hollywood loved to tell the story of Katharine Hepburn's great romance with Spencer Tracy. Their relationship lasted more than 20 years and was widely portrayed as one of the most passionate love stories in film history. But Carson believed the reality was far more complicated. Tracy, a devout Catholic, never divorced his wife. The public explanation for the relationship became that Hepburn was his devoted lifelong partner despite the circumstances. Yet Hepburn lived much of her life independently, and many biographers later describe her closest relationships as being with women. Carson reportedly admired Hepburn's quiet independence. She often wore trousers, rejected traditional Hollywood glamour, and lived according to her own rules. To him, her authenticity appeared more clearly in those choices than in the romantic narrative Hollywood promoted. 4. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando changed acting forever. His performances in A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and The Godfather redefined realism on screen. Carson reportedly found it ironic that an actor celebrated for emotional honesty also lived with certain personal secrets. Brando's public image emphasized his relationships with women, his marriages, and his reputation as a romantic rebel. Yet in later interviews, Brando openly acknowledged having relationships with both men and women. For Carson, this contradiction symbolized Hollywood itself, a place where truth was celebrated in art, but often hidden in life. 5. James Dean. James Dean's career lasted barely 2 years, yet he became one of the most enduring cultural icons of the 20th century. His performances in East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant defined a generation's idea of rebellion. Dean died in a car crash at just 24 years old. Carson never interviewed him, but he heard countless stories from Hollywood insiders over the years. Some rumors suggested Dean formed relationships with influential figures who helped advance his career. Whether those stories were true or exaggerated remains debated. Carson reportedly saw the rumors as less about Dean himself and more about the brutal power structures of Hollywood. In a system where opportunity was tightly controlled, young actors sometimes felt enormous pressure to survive however they could. Dean's early death froze his image forever, protecting the myth from the scrutiny a longer career might have brought. 6. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich brought something radically different to Hollywood. From The Blue Angel onward, she cultivated a bold image that blended glamour with androgyny. Dietrich wore tuxedos, spoke openly about attraction to both men and women, and embraced an aura of mystery that fascinated audiences. Carson reportedly admired her confidence. Unlike many stars of her era, Dietrich didn't completely hide her sexuality from insiders. Instead, she made ambiguity part of her persona. Her European sophistication allowed her a level of freedom that American stars rarely enjoyed. To Carson, she represented something rare, a performer who carved out space to live more authentically inside a rigid industry. 7. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr became famous for playing the brilliant defense attorney in Perry Mason. On screen, he was the ultimate champion of truth and justice. But Burr constructed one of the most elaborate fictional biographies in Hollywood. He claimed to have been married multiple times and told emotional stories about a wife and son who had died tragically during World War II. Those stories were entirely fabricated. In reality, Burr spent decades with his partner Robert Benavides. Carson reportedly found the situation heartbreaking. Burr wasn't just hiding his sexuality, he had created an entire imaginary life to protect himself. 8. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester. Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester were married for more than 30 years. Both were highly respected performers, Laughton known for films like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Lanchester forever remembered as the bride in Bride of Frankenstein. According to many Hollywood insiders, both partners were gay. Their marriage functioned as a kind of mutual protection. By presenting themselves as a traditional couple, they shielded each other from the career-ending consequences that could follow public exposure. Carson reportedly viewed their relationship not as deception, but as a practical solution to an impossible situation. They created a partnership that allowed both of them to survive and thrive in an unforgiving industry. 8 legendary actors. 8 private lives shaped by secrecy. Carson never exposed them. In fact, he respected them deeply. The real problem, he believed, wasn't the stars themselves. It was the Hollywood system that demanded its idols be perfect fantasies, forcing the people behind those images to hide who they truly were. And that hidden truth may be one of the most revealing stories in Hollywood history. If you love the scandals, rivalries, and secrets behind Hollywood's biggest legends, subscribe to Hollywood Feuds.